Venus and star blessings, beloveds. Hope you're all doing well. Sorry for the late upload of this full moon video, but sometimes life happens. So anyway, there's quite a few interesting themes that I want to share with you today, not only about the full moon, but certainly the full moon, which occurred really just a few hours ago. I was asleep. Well, I kind of woke up at that time, but then went back to sleep. Okay. I just want to say, to start with, I was thinking a lot about personal limitations, which is defined or shown to us through the archetype of Scorpio. The personal limitations that we come under numerous challenges and tests to overcome, right? To transform. The personal limitations often speak to matters where we are conditioned, essentially. So Scorpio takes us into those zones where it shows us our own personal limitations and how we might work through those to evolve and transform so that we can grow as a soul, as an individual. And then I was thinking about Saturn being one of the greater malefics. When you are born at night, Saturn is said to be your greater malefic. When you are born during the day, it is Mars that is your greater malefic. There's many different meanings and associations to that, but Saturn at the healthiest level teaches us to know our own personal limits in a healthy way. And I was thinking about this matter a lot relative to the full moon as well, because the full moon is actually square Jupiter. I'll get to that in a minute, but there is a particular photographer slash media press individual who has been photographing what's been going on in Palestine for 106 days non-stop, basically risking his life, pretty much every day in order to show what he has been seeing through his eyes. Like it or not, judge it or not, it doesn't really matter. That's what he's been doing. And a couple of days ago, he announced that he was going to leave and resign. He couldn't, he just couldn't do anymore. And the interesting things that came out of that were, sadly, the incredible backlash that he received from so many people in the world, so much judgment, saying that he's not a true hero because he's left and he hasn't stayed, and so on and so forth. And I thought, well, it's so easy for people to stand there and bash people from a distance, from their computer, from their phone, from online platforms and so forth. But did anybody walk in his shoes specifically? Many people did in Palestine, but for the people observing him and making those incredibly harsh judgments, I thought it just reminded me of just the world of technology, at that really lower level, that Gemini level, which just speaks words so easily and doesn't really think, there's no real deep thought about what one is saying. It's just words coming out like verbal diarrhea, as it were. This man, young man, he's only 24, basically realized his own limits, that he got to that point where he just realized what his own limits were relative to what he was doing. And that just got me thinking about this matter of, wanting to transform our personal limitations and also having a healthy relationship to the archetype of Saturn, to the planet of Saturn, from the point of view of understanding what our own personal limitations are, and that we must integrate with that. We must understand that. It's sort of, this is very broad and bigger picture, but it's very, very true. We may want to do a million things in this lifetime, we may want to practice so many different things, or learn so many different things, or experience so many different things. And we simply cannot. We have limitations. That is just a fact of any given life. We cannot be everything. We cannot experience everything in one lifetime, which means we have to know our personal limitations. We have to know when to say no, when to stop. And we have to know how to follow our heart, Leo, and our soul, Pluto, our soul's desires. So the full moon in Leo, I feel is, well, it started at the new moon in Capricorn, which was an interesting, this month is probably, for me, it's the most fascinating month. There's going to be a lot more really unusual and different new patterns of energies unfolding throughout this whole year, particularly when we have the Venus, Mars, Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, which I'll come back to speak to that. But there's a lot going on. You know, Jupiter's going to ingress into Gemini. When it does, it's going to form a trine to Pluto. There's really magical things happening. But bringing it back to the present moment, and the present moment is a great phrase for the full moon in Leo, because Leo actually is so present. That archetype is so present in itself, in its heart center. And that's what the full moon in Leo invites us to step into that personal heart-centeredness. The opposition, of course, which is the sun in Aquarius, which has a conjunction to Pluto, illuminates the Leo-Aquarius axis, which is, it's several different things, but it is our own heart-centeredness, our own ability to speak from our heart, to feel from our heart, to recenter ourselves, right? Because in the age of technology, as we all are aware, over probably quite a few decades now, to some extent, the level of, you know, information, ability to research this, to look into this, to the exposure of information in whichever stream it's coming from, is incredibly overwhelming. And for the most part, it really decenters us, you know, because we have, as human beings, we have a natural curiosity, you know, we have a thirst for knowledge, we have a thirst for wisdom. And because there's such a massive distribution of learning and information and knowledge, and a lot of BS as well, we get, you know, sort of swept away into this pool of infinite information, which actually takes us out of our heart center. So the full moon in Leo is a really powerful reminder to step back into our heart center and be present with where we are at the moment, be totally and utterly present with our heart center. And the opposition with Pluto and the sun, I think, is reflecting, you know, just the whole entire collective transitions, of course, that we are going through from a political sense, from a humanitarian level. There's so many different issues taking place, but I think the alignment there is really highlighting to us our own heart-centeredness, standing in that, and actually having an awareness of the rest of the world as well, of humanity, and our own position from our heart relative to humanity, our relationship to humanity. So being present with our heart of hearts. You know, I was meditating last night, and I was meditating into the heart of my soul. So I feel like we have this organ called a heart, human heart, which is extremely powerful because of its electric magnetic field around it. But then we have another heart that is in the soul, and that is like the deeper heart of who we are. So just remembering that, going back into that present state, Leo is the one sign that takes us straight into that heart center, so we can remember our own beingness, you know, our own heart-centeredness, as opposed to being scattered all over the place. The fact that Pluto is there this is a phenomenal month, because the new moon was at the 29th degree of Capricorn. So, a massive completion of something was taking place, even though it was the new moon. And then 2 weeks later, we have the full moon in Leo. But actually before that, so we had the new moon in Capricorn, and then, a day later, or actually an hour later, the sun went into Aquarius, and then a day later, the sun met up with Pluto in Aquarius, starting off this whole new journey for us relative to Pluto in Aquarius, because the previous times that Pluto dipped into Aquarius, it was not conjunct the sun in Aquarius. And now 2 weeks later, we have this full moon in Leo. And within this, when this cycle ends in 2 weeks' time, we're going to have a new moon in Aquarius. So this Leo-centered, heart-centered energy at the moment is a very powerful portal for us to step into, reminding us of being really authentic with our heart center. And authentic is a word that corresponds to Uranus and Aquarius. And, Aquarius is in the picture here, and the heart center is Leo. So it's having an authentic heart within our life journey, with where we are standing, where we are evolving towards as well, because Aquarius is always connecting us to the future, the possibilities that are coming. And so the new moon in Aquarius, which comes up in 2 weeks, which of course I'll come back to speak to that, but it's just interesting to note that when this cycle ends, we go back into that Aquarian energy again with a new moon in Aquarius, right? So it is very much about people and humanity, collective consciousness, the collective family, unison, unity, for all of us to be coming together from our heart center, not from our mind. That's, I think, a very important point, because if we try to connect only with our minds, what we're going to find is conflict for the most part, because we all have very different opinions and very different perspectives. And unfortunately, for the most part, in the world of the personality and the mainstream domain, these diverse opinions and perspectives find themselves in a field where conflict emerges through it, because for my opinion or my perspective to be right, yours has to be wrong. That's essentially the underpinning of the diversity that exists in the world of personality. Unfortunately, the human race is not evolved enough yet to stand in a space where they have an appreciation for the diversity and just give and allow space for that diversity and difference, and allow it to be whatever it is without it becoming a conflict. We're not there yet, but hopefully we will get there. So getting back to the Leo full moon and Aquarius being opposite, this is a really powerful call, because we're going to have, a couple of decades of this Leo Aquarius axis emphasized, right? Well, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. So we've got a long journey ahead, and this is just the beginning. This is just a tiny little snippet, a tiny little tip of the iceberg of what we are learning to evolve and cultivate in our life. That is to be heart-centered, authentic and true with our heart, and uniting with the human family from that space, as opposed to from just our perspectives and ideas. As I said, that part of it, for the most part, tends to bring in a lot of conflict. I might actually just share my screen. And what have I got there? I was just looking at a few different things. Okay. So this is the full moon that occurred just literally hours ago. It's about 5 o'clock this morning, Melbourne, Australia time. And as you can see, Jupiter is squaring this full moon. Now, Jupiter, itself is generally not a problem. It's not a problematic energy. It's a benefic, right? So it essentially inherently brings no harm. But it is squaring this full moon. Square aspects are very dynamic energies. They usually bring up matters that are difficult to resolve for the most part. I think from a collective perspective, at least, that the Jupiter squaring this full moon, to me, it feels like it highlights any imbalances that are showing up collectively in the human family, any imbalances that do not reflect standing and being present in our heart center, being afraid to stand in our heart for fear of judgment or exclusion, or being misunderstood, or not being liked, or all those sorts of things. And also the Aquarian component, Jupiter squaring the Aquarian side of it, will show, I think, the imbalances that occur, from a human broad perspective, in that are we stepping into the truth of our heart and being present in our heart from the point of view of how we see the entire human family? It's not a mental thing, in other words. It's a heartfelt, heart-centered position to stand in. And, Leo is a very dramatic sign, and it can speak to a lot of drama. So there might be some pretty dramatic and pretty intense dramatic issues flaring up at this time as well, because the moon, of course, is opposite Pluto. So there's very intense emotional reactions and responses to things. And sometimes the level of our emotions and feelings, they're not rational. They're not supposed to be rational, right? But I think the Aquarian energy does help us to bring in that level of also being able to be somewhat objective as well. So it's a delicate dance of balancing our ability to be present in our heart, whilst actually being clear and objective enough to view the broader picture as well, and our relationship to it overall. That's, in a nutshell, what I think this full moon is highlighting for all of us. And as I said, the Jupiter being square this full moon, because Jupiter is the planet of expansion and a full moon is what is illuminated, then Jupiter is going to expand on the matters being illuminated relative to Leo Aquarius, which once again is being present in our heart and our relationship to the entire human family. And are we being authentic with our position in that as well? And I think, Pluto being here again, as I said, there's an underlying, very intense, passionate expression of what we feel about things from the point of view of the moon in Leo. The moon in Leo, this full moon in Leo, happens to be right on Israel's natal moon, which I mentioned in a post in the community section, which I think will highlight some pretty interesting matters, because days later, after this full moon, Mars becomes visible in the latitude of Israel. So I think that's going to bring a lot of new matters to the surface, to our visibility, because Mars becoming visible means all things Mars now start to become visible. As I've said before, though, the visibility of any planet, for that matter, differs based on latitude. So in Israel, it does happen to be a few days after the full moon at 22 degrees of tropical Capricorn, which happens to square Israel's ascendant-descendant axis as well. And the ascendant-descendant axis in a chart that's not speaking to a single person, an individual, a mundane chart, as they often are referred to, then the ascendant-descendant axis in the chart of Israel, for instance, would describe their relationship to everyone else, being the world, because the ascendant would be the people of Israel and the descendant will be their opposition, anyone they are opposing. And given Mars is going to square that axis, I think that's going to, and visible and square the ascendant-descendant axis, I suspect that's going to bring in some pretty challenging oppositional scenarios. Let's see if I'm right. That's what it feels like to me. The other important matters going on here as well is Venus ingressed into Capricorn just a couple of days ago. And Venus picks up some really positive aspects, really helpful aspects to both Jupiter and Saturn, actually. So she will form a trine, a sextile to Saturn. That's already within range at the moment. And then later on, she will form a trine to Uranus. Before that, she will form a trine to Jupiter. So let's just talk a little bit about Venus in Capricorn first. From an evolutionary perspective, Venus in Capricorn tends to highlight matters within ourselves that speak to perhaps a lack of nurturance and support, primarily from our parents, caregivers, people who acted as our parents, as it were. So the Venus in Capricorn tends to force the individual to find their own ability to feel secure within themselves without that support and nurturance from those external support systems, as it were. It's not an easy place, actually, Venus in Capricorn, from that evolutionary perspective. And before I unpack that further, I just want to say I wrote a post the other day of Venus in Capricorn and titled it Venus in Capricorn, the lusty goddess. And I deliberately wrote that comment because I knew it would get a reaction. And I found that a lot of people were quite surprised that I used that word. And they just didn't seem to understand that Venus in Capricorn is actually very lusty. It's the lusty goat. And that just showed me, I guess, the lack of knowledge that people do have, even just in the archetypes, you know. So people will speak and will say things, regurgitate other people's ideas and, you know, copy and paste and, you know, and so on and so forth. Is that stuff's just endless. But when you know astrology and you make a simple statement like that and you see people's responses, it just shows you very quickly, in fact, how little people really do understand. The fact is that all the earth signs, all three earth signs, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn, all are associated to the physical body, to the senses, to sensuality, hence the lustful components of all three signs, three earth signs. So yes, Venus in Capricorn is very, very sensual and very, very sexual, but she's very private and very reserved about it and very cautious about it and will not trust very easily at all. It takes a long time for a Venus in Capricorn to trust anybody and to open themselves up, to be vulnerable, to express that deep sensual sexual side to them. And that usually comes from, as I said, it's lack of support and nurture, but it's also the lack of approval, because Capricorn is the archetype that corresponds to judgment. And so it is often the case with Venus in Capricorn that the person as a child felt that they weren't accepted, right? Felt judged for trying to be who they are. So part of the evolutionary journey for Venus in Capricorn is to work through those sorts of issues. It's more complex than that, but that's just summarizing it. So I guess from a transit perspective, you know, Venus in Capricorn, depending on you and depending on, you may have Venus in Capricorn natally, you may have other planets, personal planets in Capricorn. Obviously, you have Capricorn somewhere in your chart. And so wherever Venus is transiting at the moment, she's speaking to those sorts of themes if they are underlying themes for you at all. And also just speaking to our own journey with Venus and Capricorn for the next few weeks from the point of view of self-authority, right, which is Capricorn again, speaking to the value in our relationships and the seriousness of how we step into certain relationships and including professional relationships. So some of those themes shall be highlighted with Venus journeying through Capricorn, and picking up that sextile to Saturn is wonderful because there's a mutual reception going on there between Venus in Capricorn and Saturn in Pisces, because Venus is in Saturn's sign and Saturn is in Venus's exalted sign. So when you have a reception one way or a mutual reception, it basically amplifies the benefit of that energy being exchanged by those two bodies. So this is speaking to our financial matters. It's speaking to our overall things that we love and enjoy and value. It's speaking to our relationships. It's speaking to our relationship to ourselves, our self-love. So Saturn is giving Venus support in what she's trying to accomplish through the process of Capricorn, which may sometimes be, depending on who you are and what passage you are going through in life at the moment, it may be felt perhaps at a more surface level around your financial matters and so forth, maybe certain projects you were trying to get going at the moment. Well, and maybe there's been some delays, or maybe there's been not a lot of energy coming out of what you've been trying to create, let's say. I think the Saturn forming this sextile with Venus is going to bring in the opportunities that can come out of what you've been committing yourself to and how you've been applying yourself to it. You know, there's a mutual reception here, so they are helping each other out. So any hard work, in other words, that you have been doing and are still prepared to continue, Saturn's going to reward, right? Reward. Saturn and Venus contacts are generally not the most pleasurable when it comes to the sensual delights of our sensual life and so forth. But when it comes to stability and growth and laying foundations and working on things, working on long-term projects, then Saturn is very, very helpful, especially with a sextile aspect, because sextiles speak to opportunities that can now open up for you, right? The trine to Jupiter is amazing because it's the two benefics basically in alignment together, and there is a one-way reception here because Jupiter is in Venus's sign and it's a trine. Trines are often, trine transits are often a portal that feels like the universe is supporting us in this particular area of life. What is the area here? Again, it's money, relationships, values, enjoyment, things we love, those sorts of things, and our ability in expanding further in all of those sorts of things that we are basically trying to expand it at this point in our life. So Jupiter, being another benefic, is basically saying, Venus, I've got your back, you know, I'm helping you. And Jupiter is in Venus's sign. So as I said, one-way reception. And of course, Taurus is the sign of material security and finances and money and things like that. So there's a fair bit of support and lots of opportunities that could come out of these aspects from Jupiter and Saturn to Venus, you know, over well, pretty much the rest of this month. And then later on, we're going to have Venus trine Uranus, which is a wonderful aspect, you know. Basically, that's going to bring up matters of what we have been working on, Saturn, and the opportunities that are presented to us through Saturn sextiling Venus and through Jupiter trining Venus. The Uranus then comes in and enables us to maybe do something a little bit, you know, off center, as it were, a little bit outside of the box, you know, less traditional, because Venus in Capricorn, she is very traditional, and she can really sort of get a lot of benefit from Uranus in the context of loosening up a bit and loosening up that cautious side to her, because she can be very, very rigid and very restrained and very cautious in Capricorn. I've seen it in people I know very, very well, you know, that just do not reveal to you anything of what they're feeling, never show you anything. And it's understandable with Venus in Capricorn, but we are also supposed to be evolving through the lessons that are presented with each planet in a particular sign. So Venus can do really great with the trine to Uranus. There's a sense of, you know, just, you know, allow yourself to step into the unknown. Don't be so guarded about what you're trying to create, and don't be so controlling about it. Allow the fluidity and momentum and movement of energy and life to open things up to you that you never thought before, because Uranus is always thinking outside of the box. It's not thinking about what we see and what we expect. It's the complete opposite to that. So to really integrate with the Uranian energy, we must let go of the cautious side to us to be able to make that space for the unknown and the unexpected, which is Uranus, to actually come through to us. So I think, you know, for the next few weeks, Venus in Capricorn's got some really great aspects and really great opportunities on all those levels that I've just described. The other things that are really highlighted at this present moment during this full moon, actually, and it's building up, is the conjunction between Mars and Mercury in Capricorn. Now, Mars is in his exalted position, and Mars is now visible in Melbourne, has been for a few days, actually, but will not be visible in New York, USA, for instance, till February sometime. So these are nuances that are really, really important, that are very significant to consider when we're looking at the transits of Mars, because when Mars is visible and when Mars is invisible, there's a different energy, there's a different momentum, there's different things playing out. And that is the case with every planet. For example, when Venus goes through her invisible stages, which she does pretty much every time she transitions from morning star, evening star, evening star, morning star. You know, she goes through a passage there. There's two different passages, actually. It depends which cycle we are looking at. But one cycle is connected to Gorgona, Medusa, very dark passage she goes through when she's invisible. So there's lots of nuances and different interpretations and understandings of when planets are visible and invisible. And because they take place at, you know, different times, different days based on latitude, then it's very difficult to speak to just one collective perspective on Mars being invisible, because it's visible for me here in Melbourne at the time, but it's not visible for you guys in New York. Do you see what I mean? So we have to find how to work with that, how to understand from our own personal, I suppose, birth chart and life story relative to Mars's invisibility and visibility. Now, the conjunction to Mercury, and of course being in the archetype of Capricorn, I think I mentioned this when I did a live stream a few days ago, just speaking to matters around government, courts, international court systems, all those sorts of things. There's tremendous debate, argument, conflict going on really serious matters that obviously need a voice. And Mars Mercury in Capricorn is a very powerful voice. Of course, it's going to bring in a lot of conflict when you're talking about the opposition, when you're talking about going to court, when you're talking about debating. That's Aries Libra. It's that relationship axis, of conflict and finding some sort of balance, ultimately, Libra. But in Capricorn, it really highlights the collective matters around politics and government across the whole spectrum. And there's so many things going on. I couldn't possibly look up everything and point to every single thing. There's just unbelievable, matters going on all over the world, a lot of which I don't even know about because I don't have the time to sit there and read, every single news headline and so on and so forth. But here's what I'm getting to. This Mars Mercury is actually squaring the nodes. It's an applying square to the nodes. So I think there's going to be some really crucial matters to do with politics and government that are going to, they're going to be at the bends. Mars Mercury is at the bends, meaning the nodes, squaring the nodes. So there's going to be something very significant fought for and changed through argument in politics that's going to change, the course, the direction that certain policies and laws and things that will, have either some sort of collective impact or some very specific impact in certain countries and certain states that changes that course of direction, right? That's what I see with this Mercury-Mars squaring the nodes. Of course, that can bring up our own matters in our personal life where we may be in conflict with others about certain points of view we have. And I guess at worst, with Mercury in Capricorn, it can be just being so rigid, with our thoughts, right, and our point of view, because it's being filtered through Capricorn, which is the consensus reality. It's the status quo, right? It's the world sees this and the world says that and the world thinks that, so it must be right. Well, no, doesn't mean it's right at all. We have to find our own authority. That's the deeper component of Capricorn. It's being our own authority with, with natural law, with man-made law, being in alignment with all those sorts of things with our own level of authority, not needing an external authority and source to dictate the terms and conditions of what we should think, what we should perceive, what we should follow and communicate and so forth. So that's part of the picture of this Mercury in Capricorn. Okay, so let's see. I think as well, because this conjunction with Mars and Mercury is also squaring Chiron. See, Chiron is at almost 16 degrees of Aries. So at a personal level, that can be really difficult conversations that come up that can be really hurtful to one or both parties at a personal level. And so we may find that certain things that we hold on to or perceive when we are in conversation maybe with another or maybe even in a debate or something like that, that conversation will bring up perhaps some of our vulnerabilities and some of our own insecurities, because Chiron tends to bring up vulnerabilities, insecurities, and the fear of rejection. that's one side, the flip side to that coin. The flip side to that coin is a bit harder to get to because it's a square, and a square will always bring up conflict. As I've said before, sometimes conflict can be a very healthy thing because it shifts the energy, it shifts the narrative, it shifts us out of a little comfort zone that we may be stuck in. And we need that conflict to move us out of that comfort zone so that maybe we can think about something else. Maybe we can see it a little bit differently. Maybe we can understand it a little bit differently. That's the flip side to this coin of Chiron squaring the Mars Mercury, but it always depends on who we are, what's going on in our life, and where this shows up, if indeed it does. So that's just another interesting passage there. Also, the Mars Mercury conjunction, well, they will individually, they will actually come to trine Uranus as well. So this will be happening. Let me just let's just clear some of those lines and animate the chart. So Mercury trines Uranus basically on the 29th January. Venus on this day is exactly trine Jupiter. She's exactly sextile Saturn. So, for the next few days, we're stepping into all these energies that I've been talking about, with Venus to Jupiter, Saturn, and then the Mars-Mercury conjunction, which pretty much is exactly square the nodes here as well. And Mercury is trine Uranus, and Mars is trine Uranus there as well. So really for the rest of January, we've got all these energies in play, which are actually favorable. The most challenging one is the Mercury-Mars conjunction square the nodes, but that can bring about the very necessary different courses that we will be heading towards, because the nodes are always speaking to the collective evolutionary path, what we are stepping into, to some extent what we are leaving behind, South Node. And the Mars trine Uranus and Mercury trine Uranus, I think, because it's happening whilst these two are squaring the nodes, and there will be, I think, some significant debates around policies, and that could be around border issues, things like that, because Mercury is, the god of travel, commerce, exchanging goods and services and things like that. I mean, there's a big problem with Palestine relative to one of the borders, one of the gates borders, whatever you want to call it, that goes right into Egypt. I heard from a particular source, and I believe this source is authentic and genuine. I could be wrong, I don't know, but I'm just repeating what I've heard. The Palestinians are being charged about $9,000 to cross that border. Imagine that. I don't want to get started on Palestine because the horror that's still going on there is inconceivable. But anyway, from a border issue, Mercury, something's going to shift there. So something has to shift. And also there are, lots of other border policies and issues that are happening in various countries. It's not just in Palestine. That's just one example. So I think because of the square to the South nodes, and then pretty much at the same time the trine to Uranus, there'll be some type of breakthrough that happens that really helps a lot of these situations that are very, very conflicting and very rigid and very stuck at the moment, and that will come through perhaps certain policies or certain government matters that take place in courts. Let's see. But the Uranus is hopeful, very, very hopeful. So be very interested to see what comes up with that. The other thing that it's really outside of all of this, but it's connected to Pluto in Aquarius, and I thought it was just super interesting. This morning, it was announced in Saudi Arabia that they will be opening an alcoholic shop. Now, that may sound to you like a big deal, like a no big deal, I mean, but it is a big deal because they banned alcohol back in 1952 in Saudi Arabia. And I think one of the royals at that time shot some English person that was involved in, I don't know, transporting alcohol, or I'm not sure what the exact story is to that. But anyway, it's this is Pluto in Aquarius. Now, admittedly, the underlying motivation to it is all about business, because Saudis are all about business. And no offense to any Saudis here, and it's not to make a judgment on the entire Saudi cultural community, but the people at the high end of things are, they are business people. I lived in Saudi Arabia for years. So I say this through personal experience, not just through what I read or what somebody told me. I've seen it with my own eyes. They are just business people. It's a fact. So this opening, it's the Crown Prince, actually, that's given permission for this to take place. There are certain regulations and rules around it and so forth, and it's not for the Saudi natives themselves. It's actually for all the expats that live there or travel through there and so forth. But let me just say this. When I lived there, alcohol was available just about everywhere. That's a fact. It was just hidden, that's all. But anyway, with Pluto in Aquarius, this is a new, a new sort of precedent that's being set in Saudi Arabia, which is, it's just really bizarre, totally unexpected from my perspective. I think that's very much Pluto in Aquarius. As I said, that's outside of the scope of the full moon, but I just wanted to mention it because we're going to see a lot of unexpected matters rise with Pluto in Aquarius. It's, like I said to you a moment ago, alcohol has existed in Saudi Arabia. It was just underground. What's underground? What rules underground? Pluto. So the things that are going to come up unexpectedly, a lot of it is not going to be new. It's just going to be what's being hidden. And now it's just coming up from the underground. With Pluto, it's not going to bring what's up there, as it were. It's going to bring what's underneath and reveal it and expose it and show it, for better or for worse. So we've got a lot of things to see across the board, across the entire human race, and specifically with cults and groups and religious groups and things like that, things that we never thought were actually happening, but have been happening for a long time. We just were not aware of it. So there's lots of interesting things coming up. I'm really, really, really looking forward to the Pluto trine Jupiter when Jupiter goes into Gemini. That's in May. It's not too far away. That's pretty amazing, actually. But of course, I will talk about that later on. We've started off with Pluto square Jupiter, and then, within a few months later, a couple of months later, Pluto forms a trine to Jupiter. So I think that's going to be very, very helpful on the collective arena for various reasons, which I'll come back and speak to. But those are things to look forward to. Also, we have the, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction coming up in Taurus. That's 19th of April. That's an amazing energy. That's really beneficial, actually. There's so many things going on with the world of money and money systems. There's still so much uncertainty. There's so much talk of what the so-called planned agendas are, and so on and so forth. But I think the truth is, at this point in time, there's still a lot of uncertainty as to which direction it's going to go in. And I have to say, with Pluto in Aquarius, I mean, quite apart from the theory and the significators of what Pluto in Aquarius speaks to, you know, from a gut feeling, it feels to me like there's going to be numerous systems that will start to be born and developed that are all about the people. This extreme, you know, spectrum that we have of the majority having very little or nothing, and then a certain group of entities and so forth having it all. This huge imbalance and unjust pattern of way of life is going to start to change really over the next 20 years. So we have to be patient because it's not going to happen overnight for sure, but there's going to be significant changes in all those sorts of systems. Pluto in Aquarius is power to the people, you know, very simply put. But we have to, and circling back to the full moon, you know, we have to be really aligned with our heart center and be really authentic Aquarius, and authentic and aligned with the world, you know, with the people, and understand that the diversity and differences will always be there to some extent. But if we just allow our mind to be overtaken by the absolute bombardment of information that's out there and the very purposeful and intended narratives and storylines that unfold for the purposes of division, we must come back to our own center and our own authority and be able to discern these things, you know. Otherwise we just get swept up, you know, in this in the matrix, and the lines of the matrix are just disintegrating, and there's new lines being born. Yeah, okay. I think that's a good place to leave it. Finally, my classes are starting on the 9th of February, which is not too far away. Shoot me an email if you're interested. It's a 12-week series. It's going to be a wonderful journey of exploration. It's a nice group of people that are currently there already because they were there for the last series. Numerous chart examples, you know, evolutionary astrology, traditional, some Babylonian astrology, various asteroids going to be exploring as well. You know, Lucifer, really looking into that archetype. Lilith, goddess Lilith as well. There's quite a few different things we'll be looking at. So a lot of, for lack of a better word, you know, the shadow, more shadow components or dark components of certain archetypes that are that do reflect the darker side of life. But in my, you know, many years of experience on this earth plane, this lifetime, one thing that I've always sort of understood is that the more we deny and suppress the dark side, as it were, the more we see it out there, because anything that we don't own in ourselves, we will actually see it in another person, and it will, you know, trigger a particular response or reaction. And usually it's quite a strong response and reaction, or repulsion, because that demonstrates just how unconscious we are about that aspect of ourselves that we have denied. We have denied it so much and suppressed it so much that the only way we can see it is when we see it in somebody else. These elements are so important to understand, and there's so many symbols in astrology that help us understand these components. And what's the benefit of understanding this? It's not just about Gemini knowledge. Knowledge is one thing, wisdom is another thing. That's Gemini and Sagittarius. With knowledge, yes, we can have a certain level of power, for sure. Knowledge is power, there is truth in that, but it can only take us so far. Sagittarius is wisdom, and it is what helps us create meaning out of everything that we experience, perceive, and so forth, understand. So that's kind of part of the approach that comes into my classes as well. So let me know if you're interested, and I'll see you guys very, very soon. I hope you enjoy this full moon. It's still full as we speak right now, and will be, you know, till tomorrow sometime. And it's an energy that's going to really just, you know, unfold over the next 2 weeks, right? Until we have a new moon again. So even though the full moon was just a few hours ago, that energy is not just active and important in that precise moment of the full moon. There's lots of patterns of things, you know, unfolding really for the next couple of weeks, relative to the short term anyway. And it is a period where we can really reflect inwardly, because the second half of the cycle, which is the full moon, from that point on, how the moon travels around in relation to the sun, the second half of the cycle is much more about the collective wisdom, bigger picture perspectives, deeper understanding, inner internal reflection. So this full moon in Leo is taking us through that journey for the next 2 weeks in that way. So it is very personal because it's Leo, and the personal component is what gives us with the opportunity to be really present with our heart, be really authentic and present, and see it from a bigger picture about the entire human family, and not just, you know, that the controlling forces and empires and systems and whatnot, you know, they're all there doing their thing. And I think our position of true power is to come back to our center and remember our own power outside of these identifications and perspectives and conditioned world stories or rules or proposals or agendas or whatever. It doesn't matter. In one way, it doesn't matter about any of that, because all of that's changing anyway, changing in ways that we can't even see at the moment. So what's always really important is to stay in our own centered power, which is the full moon in Leo. See you soon, guys.